can I back up to your 5 days of testimony for a moment? Were you aware, after all you've been through, I can see how you said you didn't have, I can't remember how you put it, but that by that time you didn't feel the allegiance to protect them. Were you aware that your testimony was going to be the thing that kind of broke things open?
Yes, yes. Bob Woodward, I thought, described it well. He said, no one expected John Dean to go down to the Senate and blow himself and everybody else up, which he did. But I fully anticipated doing that and knew the consequences of it. In fact, I was my longtime friend, still friend, Barry Goldwater Jr.,
Right.
who was then in Congress, and I'd convinced Barry to buy a house across the street for myself in a new development in Old Town Alexandria, which is really very valuable property today.
I bet. I
Uh,
bet. I
uh,
grew up near Old Town, so
but anyway, I'd known Barry's father since I'd been about 13 years of age,
mm,
and before I testified, because I said, I said, Barry, I need to talk to your dad because I'm gonna blow up the Nixon presidency. Um, and so Barry arranged for his dad to come over to Old Town where we lived, and on a Sunday morning, and I began telling the senator the highlights of what I was going to be talking about, and I said, I'm doing this because you're well plugged into Senate national security intelligence, and I don't want to do anything that's going to cause the country any problem. Uh, but so I want to run some of this by you. And after I started, he shouted at Barry, he said, bring me a shot of bourbon. This on Sunday morning, he said, I got to need something to get through this conversation. So anyway, at the end of it, he said, you just go ahead and tell the world what a liar that SOB is. And he had about broken rank with Nixon by then,
right.
but he had no doubt. Here's somebody I've known for 20 years, or about 20 years at that point. Uh,
That was really, can we talk about Senator Goldwater for a second then? Because comparing today with then, Republicans eventually began listening. They did take in the facts, but Barry Goldwater was very critical in taking the forefront and people would follow him. So tell me, I mean, that
well,
must,
Goldwater at that point was the titular head of the Republican Party as the 64 presidential nominee, and also a very admired and well liked member of the Senate.
right.
I when the senator passed, Barry asked me to come over to the funeral in Phoenix, and it was somewhat delayed because so many members of the Senate they had to charter a second Army plane to bring out
Wow.
virtually the entirety of the Senate because he was such a well-respected senator, even though he'd been out of the Senate several years at that point when he did pass. But he was well plugged in, and he's not the caricature history would have him at, as somebody who was going to chuck nuclear bombs into the men's room of the Kremlin.
Right.
Uh, he he uh, he once told me after the '64 campaign, I was in law school at the time, because Barry wanted me to work on the campaign, to manage his schedule and Michael's, his brother's schedule, and their sisters, who I'm friendly with also. But the senator said to me once, he said, I wouldn't have voted for the Goldwater who they put out there in the public as the candidate. He said, this guy was a kook. And he said, I wouldn't want anything to do with him. He said, they really did a job on me. Uh, so anyway, he was a much different man, and he was didn't have time for the kind of nonsense that Republicans today embrace. He would be horrified at what the Republican Party has become.